for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumine, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to another video with me here today. I wanted to actually bring you to one of my mountain valleys. It's behind me. I hope you can see some of it, because I don't know how many times I'm still going to be able to come here, after my transition, which I'm hoping for soon. So I really want to spend some beautiful moments alone in this beautiful, now green-filled meadows, this alpine meadows, and speak to you about something that I've asked Spirit and the Spirit of life and life-giving, what it wants to talk about today, what I want to deliver through this beautiful beauty of life. Because recently, as you know, in the follow-up of my journey, where it's taking me into a deeper descent of life, right, through my own physical form and embodiment, as the duality of spirit versus matter becomes less and less, and there's a greater merger happening. I'm going deeper into these aspects and narratives of life, which also means challenging the older, previous narratives. And what's happening is, when I'm being challenged myself in my own life, I'm challenging these narratives, and what comes with it, sometimes people as well, but everyone needs to feel through what is their own personal experience, because literally I can only open up gates myself and through myself, and everyone has to do the same. So these are just opportunities for further expansion, okay? So that's how you can take them. The first thing I want to talk about today, and then it's going to be the second more important one, is that when I was actually walking through this valley, I was contemplating on this whole notion of, the way spiritual teachings have been established on this planet through a lot of these masculine ways, right? So we have the teacher, and then we have students, and there are always groups related to that, right? So you might think, I have my own working page on Patreon. It's people who join then become a part of the group. Well, yes and no. Because that group or community of people who join in is within their own hearts. Because you have to understand, the moment when the group or community is not of people who literally embody the same understanding, they're not aligned completely. And when I say completely, it doesn't mean they all have to be the same. But they really exist within a reality framework that resonates, that can build and co-create together. Otherwise, you cannot have a group. You have many groups nowadays online, right? People can join forums, social pages, community pages, and that's not the same, because the work I do on Patreon is my own sharing. So it's just as individual as it's also anyone can join. But it's a heart-centered group. So the moment we start clustering and building this ideology of what the group is, what this consciousness is supposed to be, we can again become very rigid. And my whole life I've been living the realm of freedom, and I've never liked these imposed ideas. And when someone wants to impose something that they're perceiving at the time, or about me or reality in general, I never like that, because it feels false. And no matter how right we think we are at a certain moment, it's still our own experience, right? That's why the learning of descent of spirit is literally becoming infused with life, that life becomes your greatest teacher, right? It's the experience. And it just fills you up with this pure liquid light, and everything rest just starts stepping to the side. So there was a lot of this indoctrination in the way teachings have been shared. And I'm not talking about only religion. Spiritual teachings as well. There always has to be a certain framework, a certain group, and someone is always a leader, and it's usually an elder or a teacher of a male embodiment. And even now, when you see most of the spokespeople at this time and for this awakening are men. And there's a few women, but there's very even fewer numbers of women who are actually embodiers more than their teachers, because a teacher is more a masculine trait. The feminine Christ embodiment is what's called the Holy Spirit. You know, I remember years back when we started reading those books from Kathleen McGovern, and it was said that Mary Magdalene was the Holy Spirit. She literally represented that. She was feisty, she was fierce, she was free in her own way. Even when there was immense restrictions placed upon her, she still always stood up for herself and her feminine voice. And we are still being constantly challenged, not only by men, but also, let's say, women who have a particularly more masculine embodiment. We are still not, some people not even close, but generally speaking, collectively, even in the spiritual communities, we're still not very much benign, right? Benevolent in the way of completely being fused within masculine and feminine, like truly androgynous beings. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are. So there's very few beings who actually understand what this means. That it's all your inner experience, your inner reflection, your inner processing. And this requires deep commitment to the self, devotion to life, and understanding through compassion for others. And that's why I say, you know, you can be a group and anyone can bring a piece of knowledge to the group, but there's going to be very few people who actually understand this sharing with an integrity and very deeply respectful way. So these like more masculine ways of the way teaching was presented and anchored on this planet is the feminine now. This goddess liberation work is a part of like decluttering that and going deeper beyond that. It's like it wants to unleash itself from the shackles of this. Because what I'm talking about here is the idea of spiritual ideology and idealism versus spiritual reality and pragmatism and embodiment. And when I was growing in myself, and this always includes growing pains of course, but as I was further evolving into the narrative of life itself, not just spirituality, because you can see, you know, how many of you have actually joined spiritual groups, but in the end you felt like disappointed, like there's just people tossing and turning words around. And I see a lot of people who are so slick in their language. They're amazing when it comes to presenting their spiritual beliefs and ideals, and you think you're less than because you don't have so much knowledge or knowing in that level. You might be completely unaware of these concepts, and a lot of people who actually find out about my work say, I don't know much about these things, but they're so deeply connected. They have this natural, embodied, like being and soul, being with spirit. So being with spirit or being spiritual, it's not the same thing, right? And we still have this indoctrination, like it's global and affects all of us, that we need to always know more, that there always needs to be more knowledge, and that's how we're going to become more principle in nature. And then there's those who've studied a lot in these mystery schools, so they have an idea that they know more. So when they're very useful in the way they produce their arguments through these words, it just becomes like word per word. And the goddess, the descent of life, is no longer, you know, it doesn't want that anymore. It's BS. It wants to dismantle it in every single way. I am the closest in my embodiment to just a child. And when I was going through these rough patches in my embodiment, it's like the inner child that wanted to be liberated more and more through this goddess descent of life force, right? And when I walk about life, I'm very simple. I do have lots of understanding about very complex principles, but these come through me. I haven't learned them anywhere. I haven't picked them up anywhere. Very rarely, because I've read very few books actually in my entire life. You know, I wasn't a studied individual. I was a liberator. That was my mission. That's my calling. It will continue to be. And when I challenge myself and I challenge certain narratives, I also bring this energy out to people so they can start challenging themselves and embracing more new concepts of life that are not just ideas and ideologies that we formulate around and they become belief systems, right? So the difference between, there's two distinct ways of what we might refer to as spiritual or the knowledge of spirit. And I want to today draw a fine line and say, you know, it's not about separation tactics. It's about understanding that not everything that's being now presented to us as spiritual is truly illumined. Okay, so what's the major difference? So when life comes about, right, it comes through very few simple principles. Life comes through unity principle, unity dividing itself, becoming equalized polarity that is able to bring about life, and then you have a divine trinity. These basic principles are the foundation of all life. And through these principles, life started building upon itself and developing more and more complex organisms and mechanisms of life, through which we all know the human consciousness was an aspect of, was one developed creation. And because of that, the human started to mimic and reflect this and wanted to create its own principles. So the human started to contemplate on the nature of divinity, right? And we formulated our own spiritual laws and what we think the divine is, what the universe is. We are studying, right? And whether we're studying it as a science, like scientifically approaching that, or as a religion, or as any sort of other spiritual type of work, it's still our research. But unbiased from that, like separately from that, the creation science always exists. It's always like this, and these are the eternal truths. These are non-man written. They weren't developed by those aspects of creation. They came about as a result of creation itself. And the more you're liberating yourself from these narratives that were part of this creation on earth for eons of time, the more you're actually becoming the primordial version of yourself that existed beyond all these, like, if you imagine one great bubble of divinity, like this is all, but it's basically contained within, when they say the neutron stars have so much written, but in a very condensed form. It's like super heavy, but it's all in a tiny, super condensed form. It's like that, but it's all in it. But what we do, we create more complex mechanisms around, and yes, reality becomes more complex. And I want to really draw a line of what the difference is, what the human spirituality or human-based spirituality is, which is the human perception of the way we relate to spirit and how life comes about and what we think things are like. We say, well, these are high councils, these are soul laws, this is karma, these are soul groups, that's the soul family, that's a soulmate, that's a twin flame. So we categorize these things through our own perception. But unbiased from that, like I said, there's creation science, which is how life works, how universe works. And it's more scientific than it's actually typically religious. But in our way, in the way that humanity has always looked up to, the nature of the divine, we've piled upon a lot of things that are now, when we're on the precipice of a new age and becoming newborns, they're kind of rubbish. They're no longer useful for us. So when I present my work is now meant to be going beyond those thresholds and burning those bridges that were connecting the old and somehow passing into the new. Well, eventually even that which is the passing will have to be burned because you're on the other side. It's no longer needed. So you see, when you go deeply within, each and every one of you will eventually come to a point in your awareness, in your own contemplative journey, when you're going to be challenged. And these challenges are to help us release these beliefs about what is supposed to be us being spiritual. What does it even mean? Everyone is spiritual in their own way. It's just this separatism that's always there, and we segregate things and put them into boxes. But we're at different levels of awareness, right? Perceiving that. So my own perspective and what I came here to embody and what I can teach, because I embody, it's not the other way around, right? First I teach and then I will embody it. It's basically a reflection that comes back once something is individually perceived through me, and once it's integrated, and then it can be shared. It becomes a part of the greater stretching out. It stretches out into a greater reality. And then anyone can become more quickly susceptible to that when they're also opening up to those greater aspects of life and what more life can be than just what we've thought spirituality to be, let's say, for eons of time. We're changing now. Remember that. There's a lot of things that we've seen as fixed, and we said this is the eternal nature of spirit and it's how it is. But we will now have to go really deep and really see carefully what, through our conscious observation, what is truly that and what isn't. What have we picked up along the way and what we've made it to be, because that's one reason behind it is we needed to view reality in a certain way because we were at that stage of our development. And even spirituality and the way we connect to source or divinehood, divine creation, is changing. It's interchangeable. The creation itself not, but the way we co-create with it changes. So when we are not flexible enough and open enough to perceive these new ideas, and they're not just new ideologies, they're just ideas that life brings us through us experiencing it, and we are not ever allowing ourselves the new experience if we're still based in this, and everything can become a dogma. Whether you would say, oh, it's gnosis, or it's this and that. Well, gnosis is basically a body of knowledge. Not necessarily all aspects of it we would say, well, that's the ultimate because it's gnosis. There's humanized aspects of that, which is like the universal gnosis, right? And when you're on Earth and you can write books and volumes, because there's so many volumes of books nowadays, right? These ancient scriptures have no end. Because our perception has no end, right? It's unlimited. We can perceive in an infinite amount of ways. And it becomes more structured and structured. And the more it becomes structured, the less life is allowed to be raw and wild as life truly is. And that's the goddess path. That's the descent of life. Not just more mechanical, structural, mind-based, right? Programmed. So everyone in their own field would defend their field like religion would to the death defend their field. That's the ultimate. Well, the spiritual circles would do the same in their esoteric science. The scientists the same way. You see, everyone is allowed to perceive what they experience at that point, but a lot of experiences are through perception, not direct experiences of life. That's what I'm saying, and this is the difference. When you are actually following the narrative of life directly, life just as impulse of life force, impulse of Holy Spirit through you, all these narratives have to step aside because you've made the choice that you want to experience life directly. You want to be unbiased, unprogrammed, unfixed, unrigid, all of that. You've chosen that. And then you say, no, I want to keep a part of this ideology because it makes me have a firm belief system around which I can actually feel sane in this reality and even function and operate. Because if this is not true as I'm seeing it, then everything falls apart. This is usually the case with most of us. We don't want to dismantle something because then our whole view, our worldview is challenged and we don't want to go there. It's totally uncomfortable. How do you go about making new rules? Well, you don't. What we've been doing for ages is like we've been changing one scripture after another, and it's like exchanging one law system with the other. It's just been replacements. We've been replacing things with other things, but we haven't really been growing the way life does organically. And this is my mission and purpose, is to present a larger view of what life truly is, my beloveds. And people who will get challenged somewhere along the line, they might say, oh, I refuse that, because you're coming from a position of judging. I'm not judging, I'm just saying this is how humanity functions and has been operating for eons of time. Just look at the world. I don't need to prove that. The reality proves itself, you know? And so a lot of these aspects need to be challenged now because it's simply time, not because some authoritative voice out there says you need to think differently now. No, it's because life has reached a climax point, not just universally or in this galaxy, because we're moving into a whole new galactic cycle, but also because humans are within them having this longing for more. And whether you've piled it up with loads of knowledge or in some other covert way, but it's still there. The longing is there. So I notice a lot of times that people who have this thirst for this, but don't understand how they can do this by withdrawing from, a lot of these narratives, they just are piling themselves and piling up their life with more things, more groups to join, more work to do, more books to read, more videos to watch. And I will often feel that pull. And sometimes others will pull me by sending me these links, and I'm like, just don't do that. I can't. I'm not going to deal with that. It's on my path. Because I have to stay really authentic with what my impulse of life was here for and what it's created for. Everyone is created for something so beautiful and so unique. And that's truly the direct nature of connecting with life. Without life, like bypassing, like imagine the streaming force, right? This life force always pulsating. And we are always like complaining how little we get by actually feeling spirit. Well, imagine how many filters we have built within our own body structure and the many energetic channels we have as a being, and how we connect to different energy pathways and different realms, right, of being. And imagine how many of these have been taken over by these belief systems. So when the life force comes in as a pure impulse, totally intact, it has to, like, it stops, and each time it becomes a little devalued. Each time, right, like within a certain point of the spiral. That's how I'm presenting it this time, although it's not as directly like this. But each time it kind of downsizes a little bit more. So when it reaches you, it's already so filtered that you're not feeling anything in particular. So naturally it's easier to go in a study group and study more about spirituality, because that's obviously, if you have an understanding how life works, right, within the many scriptures that have been already written. This was needed because, in a way, right, so many have forgotten, and we needed those reminders. But anything that's overly, any creation can outrun itself by becoming too much of itself. You know what I mean? Anything can become rigid. At any point of time, you yourself can become rigid. I myself can become rigid. That's why I'm constantly experiencing intense purging moments. Like, I'm just challenging the narrative of life through me. And life wants to be and grow more. It wants to become more through me. That's basically now my only purpose. And when I get to the next level of the life force descent, I can share, and then again and again and again, and it's endless in a way. That's how much we're dismantling now the old. And I still see so many people talking about the new and the new world, the new earth, and they're still studying all these things that were part of like previous cycles and previous ages. Like, we're still studying these scriptures that are like so super old, and the Bible, who we don't even know exactly who wrote it, because there were several beings with different agendas writing it and having their own input there. But it's time for us to start writing our own book of life. Don't you understand? It's so simple now. And I know a few people who already know that, because they tell me, all I'm feeling to do now is bring my own sense of joy into this life. Yay! Yes, for such people. I applaud them, because they've actually got it. And that there's people who are like, I feel unsafe to just be and just live my happiest life. Piling up more, right? More. And eventually that which serves us becomes just a pile of rubbish. It's how it is, right? And the body, like I said, the more it becomes illuminated, the more it will tell us, it will signal us like, ooh, I don't need that. Stop feeding me this, whether it's food or information. It doesn't matter. Right? When it gets too hot on the sunlight, you automatically step into a shade. You say, ooh, filtering out. You have a natural system of pure divine intelligence. But fear has made it something else. Another thing I want to mention is that it's easy for us to now challenge the role of darkness and the meaning and the purpose and demystifying it. But I'm seeing, because my work is more based on, the work I do is demystifying this false light narrative. And I speak more about false light than I do of darkness. I've mentioned to you one beautiful being who speaks a lot about darkness, and I've never saw anyone speaking about it so boldly and so beautifully as she does. And I've referred her channel to you many times before, and I will continue to, because I 100% support her work, and her name is Susan Ashley. And you can find her on YouTube, and I've already shared her channel. So it's called Susan and Cassandra. So false light narrative can be difficult for people to digest, because it's often non-recognizable within ourselves. This is when it gets tricky, because people start acting really defensive when something is being challenged. They're like, fighting on for their dear life, because no, they're not like this. No one's judging anyone. That's the point. But false light has to be revealed through these veils of illusion. Illusion being unveiled, just the same as we're uncovering the dark. The dark has been uncovered. It's all out there now for people who are truly awake. But the next step is for us to trying to dismantle this false light narrative. And it's been also, I think, in the Bible, false prophets. False prophet is not just a person. It's any piece of information or knowledge or something that has a limited amount of that. It's not the direct Holy Spirit infusion. It's difficult. That's why I'm always saying it's difficult for me to even present myself as a teacher, because this role falls off, falls away. But it's interesting to see at the same time, when you're just the embodier, that people no longer take you seriously, because you don't have that, I'm a teacher, I have this position, and I'm this famous person, and And people still have this old framework. They can't put you there. It's like, it's undetectable. It's like, error, unknown, unrecognizable energy. What is this? Going back to the old, you know? People start, I'm very much, as you can see, simplistic in the way I explain things, because that's how life is. Life doesn't want to just be life is not a pile of knowledge that you understand. Life is life. Life is beauty. Look at nature. I'm always in nature. That's why I understand life, because I'm in nature, not because I study books, for God's sakes. So it's like, it's so beautiful once you get it. And I know there's a lot of people already really feeling that. And many of you probably who tune into my channel are also beautiful nature lovers. I applaud you. I greet you in this space, of course, as always. But, not everyone is comfortable in this yet, because they feel a sense of void if they're not filling themselves with that which is already familiar. And that's why I mentioned that this nodal alignment with our moon nodes, right, changing into south node being Sag and north node being Gemini, which is going to be a stream of new information. We're going to constantly have to look at the old and bring the new to the old, and then it's old again, becomes the new, and it's like a circle. It's a cycle of life. And we're not just recycle bins, right? We're not just recycling knowledge and things that have already been before, and activities and that, that's why I get so agitated when someone compares me with someone else. Oh, I think this teacher is like you. No, not because I don't value them as an individual creation, because I do, and myself too. Don't do that. Let's not compare ourselves with anyone else. It's just so disrespectful. Or when someone would say, if you're really a teacher, then you have to act in this way, and you have to be in this role for me. The only thing I could truly do and be responsible for is this knowledge that I'm sharing in my own embodiment. Not even the way I share it, but well, yeah. Because what's embodied, it's already being shared naturally in this organic way. But I'm not responsible for the way people view it, the way they respond to it or react to it, what they want from me, the role they want me to play in their life. I can't. I'm not responsible for that part. People sometimes are like, you're this teacher and you're this inspiration for me, but I also want to be your friend. I can't always do that, but because for me, friendship is different than what most people perceive it to be. It's a very honorable thing. And if I'm friends with someone, like my mother is like my truest friend I've ever known, and she was never ever disrespectful towards me, nor me. But we had our fights, but they were not the same as being disrespectful. It was always because you honor the other. And I quickly see like people still don't know what that truly is. And that's why I rather withdraw, because the moment people like they want to learn from you and they simultaneously want to keep the friendship, I see they start losing that respect. I don't know why. I'm hoping that one day this can unify, because it's a very sad picture, right? If you are needing to establish a role in a position of a teacher so that you can have some effect and people actually take you seriously with your messages and your love, because that's how I share things, is through love. And that means you can never have people in the friend zone. One day, when we are beyond those filters that are still here and this duality we're creating constantly, this can coexist. But until then, no, because as long as someone is disrespectful in my way, in my nature, and this totally misinterprets what I'm even sharing or what I'm even about, and they want that to be something else, and they make it about themselves, then I cannot be there for them in that way. I'm sorry. Because my only responsibility is my own embodiment, and the same goes for everyone. But that's why I mentioned in the beginning that community has to be through the heart, because otherwise it can become rigid just as well. People think it has to be something and do this specific kind of work, and that again is entitlement. The page I have on Patreon is simply my sharing, and it's authentic, and it's the way that I receive it directly from spirit, and I like to keep it that way and in the purity. And sometimes people come there in the group community section, they start posting things and teachings from others, and it's like they have their own space to be shared, maybe it's not in alignment with what the goddess, this life descent, wants to bring through me. And I like my space to be clear for the work and the energetics that I bring for that reason, because everyone now has so many potentials, the way we can be creative, and I'm not intentionally limiting anyone's creative ability, but this is about the work, you see, not about what people think they're going to get from that. Sometimes people join because they want to meet new friends. It's not about that either. When you do, it's always going to be, oh, look, it just happened as a result of me actually pursuing this path. Like with anything else, when you have a certain concept and you project it there, you're already setting yourself up to a failure. That's why the only space that's really pure is just showing up. Keep showing up. Keep showing up with your commitment, with your steady devotion. But that devotion has to be to yourself. And if anyone at any point in our life would try to manipulate us into saying, well, if you're really devoted, you're going to do like this and that to make something work. No, because your first devotion is always to you, remember? And if something feels dishonoring, disrespectful, or non-authentic to what you really clearly represent, you're going to have to filter through that. And maybe that will, eventually come back. But it's where we are. Again, this is spiritual realism. It's not idealism. In the ideal world, we're already all there, right? But at the same time, when you look at the nature of life and really observing, you're also going to see where life is right now. And where we are right now in this moment, life needs to be embraced just as it is, without just bypassing these things. And we all want to live in beautiful spiritual communities and all want to be friends. If there's ever an argument, ooh, something must be wrong with the other person. And then it's like a lot of projection. Our responsibility is to take any argument we might have within. You never want to argue with another person. That's the thing. That's the fact. That's why I don't want to do that ever. Because it's pointless. It serves no meaning in life. Whenever you're feeling like something, whether it's a disappointment with someone or, I don't know, anything, bring it back to you. Ask yourself why, instead of first stepping out and projecting it onto the other. This is how life begins to uncoil itself within the beauty that life truly is, and not everything we're making it now. It's already hard enough, right, to live in this self-sustainable reality and becoming more organic in the world that, as you can see, there's so much darkness still in it. This is a beautiful world, right? We see, but there's also a lot of darkness and a lot of hidden darkness because it has many levels. And a lot of false light, which is light that has, like I always like to say, gotten out of its control. It hasn't merged with the affinity of creation. It wasn't love, light, right? Information and creativity merged. It was like it went too much into one upstream. And eventually you have to catch yourself when you're here, like, oh, where have I disconnected? Because I see the word love being used so many times, but there's not an action that supports that love. And I witnessed in my life a lot of people with slick language, super versatile in many spiritual terms and ideologies. Well, what the heck is that anyway? Who does it serve? It doesn't necessarily mean you're right and you're proving a point. It doesn't. So even, like I said, spirituality can be a trap, as nowadays you can see with many. So life in its purest, direct sense can never disappoint. When the impulse of life will be direct, you'll never be disappointed. You will always have and continue inner peace. You'll never project to anyone else. You won't expect things, a reality to be in a certain way, and you will understand that life will have its ups and downs for you, and you're going to have to do the integration work, and that's how embodiment comes about. And that's basically my path and what I am showing with all of you here. So thank you for taking some moments, for listening. I don't know how much time I'll have in the next days because I hope things will get a little bit eruptive in my life as well. But I'll be with you whenever I can again. So if I don't show up, I always do my work on Patreon. It's called Ascension. You can find me there, and it's about what I share, right? And anyone is always welcome. It just has to be within freedom of allowing that sharing to be pure and intact, instead of saying, well, this is what it is and this is how it's supposed to be. Always go back to your source and to your creation and ask yourself, would I like if someone did that to me? If they got involved with, even if it's just someone saying a spiritual concept to something that you've literally personally experienced or are going through, that doesn't give it value, right? It doesn't confirm it in any way. It doesn't give it validity in that sense necessarily, right? And we often do that. We dismiss things, or being dismissive through spiritual perception, because we know better, we know more, this is how it is in spiritual truth. And we often negate the experience that someone's having. Unawareingly, like I'm saying, we get very much angry if someone would say, don't do that, because you're saying, what am I doing anyway? I didn't do anything, I just stated a beautiful spiritual truth. But still, the experience needs to be acknowledged. That's where compassion comes in. We as humans don't require more projectile vomiting. I don't know why I want to say that. We don't, like when you're just lashing out, we all long for more compassion. And compassion can come as simply as when someone shares something, you're nodding with your head and feeling it in your heart. And when I've recently shared on Patreon some of my own difficult experiences, there were a few people who really just said, I feel you. Isn't that the most beautiful word, right? I feel you. You don't have to say, oh yeah, in spiritual truth, this is like this. And we don't have to say that anymore. We don't have to separate spirit and matter. Right? By acknowledging matter, by acknowledging our life's beauties and difficulties and trials and tribulations and beautiful victories, just by feeling them. And this is how we acknowledge spirit. This is how truly spirit and life wants to be honored through us. And when I'm saying this, I'm feeling like a deep inner yes of the goddess. It makes me like teary inside. It's like just by acknowledging your life fully and life of the other. No more concepts, no more words tossed around. Just feel one another, feel each other, support. And some of you are ready to embrace that, and that is enough, and that will be more than plenty because it's so needed right now. And some of you might say, this is BS, whatever. This gives me nothing, it's just words. That's okay too. I'm not asking anyone to think in a certain way. This is not about thinking anyway. It's about feeling it. You need to feel this. So that's why people who, even though they're small in numbers, when they resonate with what I shared, they're actually starting to feel this, or they're already feeling it. That's how life continues. So we're kind of like passing the baton of our feeling, the feeling side of life. The divine feminine principle needs to be awakened more. So thank you for listening again, my sweet beloveds. As always, with so much love, wisdom, and power. And I'll see you next time whenever I do, it's going to be divine timing, as always. Bye for now.